I'm Alex, 28, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the wallet of the family. Not in a metaphorical sense, literally. Once I landed my first real job out of college, a mid-level programming position at a fintech startup, it was like my parents and brother decided I'd become the family's personal ATM. At first, it was small stuff, $1.40 here for groceries, $100 there for the electricity bill. It felt good to help. I was fresh into adulthood, finally able to give back a little. But gradually, the asks became demands, and the demands became expectations. And the expectations turned into guilt trips if I ever dared say no. It didn't help that my brother Mason, older by 2 years, never seemed to have to prove anything. He flunked out of college his sophomore year, hopped between gigs, and somehow still lived in the house my grandparents had left behind, rent-free, with my parents. He drove a car I'd helped finance. He ate food I stocked the fridge with. He streamed Netflix and HBO on my accounts. And yet, at every family gathering, every dinner, every Thanksgiving, he was still the favorite son. Because Mason's charismatic, Mom would say when I asked why he never got called out for anything. He brings life to the house. Translation, I was the one who paid the bills, and he was the one who got to enjoy them. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the way they talked about me when they thought I couldn't hear. Or worse, when they knew I could. Like last year at Thanksgiving, when I flew in from Chicago, took a cab to the old family house, and walked through the door carrying groceries I'd bought along the way, only to hear Mason mutter under his breath to my mom, "Look who's here, Mr. Pay for Everything. You think he'd visit if we didn't expect him to bring something?" Mom didn't even try to whisper, "Oh, please. Alex only gets respect when he pays for it." They both laughed. Laughed. Like that was some private joke they'd been sharing for years. That night, I didn't confront them. I just smiled, helped set the table, poured the wine. I even did the dishes after dinner. Because that's what I always did. I was the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who made it. So I was expected to be okay with the disrespect. The favoritism. The way my name only came up when someone needed a check or a ride or a bailout. But something changed in me that weekend. Maybe it was the look on my face in the bathroom mirror later that night, when I realized I didn't even recognize the person staring back. Or maybe it was when I saw the framed family photo on the mantle. Mason in the center, arms slung around Mom, Dad on his other side, and me awkwardly cropped off at the edge, like a guest in my own life. So, I started planning. I didn't storm out or cut anyone off. That would have been too easy and too satisfying for them, honestly. They would have twisted it into more ammo. See, Alex always thinks he's better than us. Instead, I pulled back. Quietly. Methodically. I stopped offering to cover bills. If they asked, I'd say I had a tight quarter at work. If they pushed, I'd stall. I canceled the auto renewal on the streaming services they used, let the shared family phone plan expire, and moved all my cloud data out of the joint folder they always snooped through. But the real move? That took a little more time. You see, what they never paid attention to was that when my grandfather passed, he left the house in a legal limbo. There was no clear will, at least none they saw. Just an old draft with handwritten notes in the margins, some ambiguous language, and a lot of assumptions. Everyone assumed the house defaulted to my mom, the only child. She assumed it was hers, and so did my dad and brother. What they didn't know was that after the funeral, I sat down with Grandpa's lawyer, who pulled me aside and handed me an envelope. Inside were 2 things, a notarized final version of the will, one they never saw, and a brief letter from Grandpa, written in his shaky but unmistakable handwriting. It said, "You were always the only one who visited just to see me. No strings, no favors. Just company. I wish I'd told you sooner how proud I was. This house is yours now. Do what you think is right." I didn't touch that deed for over a year. I wasn't ready. I kept paying the property taxes out of my own account and letting them live there like it still belonged to them. I told myself I was being kind, that I didn't want to stir the pot, that maybe, someday, they'd apologize or see what they were doing or thank me. They never did. In fact, things got worse. Mason lost his latest job at a dealership and blamed me, for not pulling strings to get him something at my company. Mom started calling me less, except to send vague texts like, "We need to talk. Can you send something for groceries?" Or, "Mason's car insurance lapsed again. Can you help just this once?" The final straw came last week. My birthday. I didn't expect much. Maybe a card, a call. Instead, I got tagged in a Facebook post. A picture of Mason at some fancy steakhouse, mom and dad on either side, big glasses of wine raised in a toast. The caption? Celebrating Mason's hard work and future success. So proud of our rock. I wasn't invited. I wasn't mentioned. Not even a message. That was it. I booked a flight for that Friday and showed up unannounced. I still had a key. They were all in the living room, half watching TV and half scrolling on their phones. Mason looked up like I was the pizza guy who brought the wrong order. Didn't expect to see you, he said, tone already sarcastic. I bet, I replied calmly. Dad didn't say anything. Mom made that tight-lipped smile she always did when she was annoyed. We're a little busy right now, Alex. Can it wait? I walked over to the dining table and sat down. Opened my bag. Took out the folder. Mason chuckled. Let me guess, bills? I looked at him and said nothing. Just slid the document onto the table. The original deed, my name in bold, notarized and signed. Mom leaned forward, frowning. What is this? I spoke slowly. The house. It's mine. Grandpa left it to me. They all stared like I'd just spoken a different language. No, no, Mom said, waving a hand. That's not right. We live here. He wouldn't. He did, I said. I've just been waiting. Mason scoffed, pushing back from the couch. So what? You're kicking your own family out now? After everything we've done for you? My voice was quiet. Too quiet. Everything you've done for me. That's when Mason muttered it again, like it was some sacred truth. You only get respect when you pay for it. Mom gave a short, bitter laugh. That's why we keep you around. And that was it. No more pretending. I reached into the folder, pulled out the second paper, a formal notice of eviction, and slid it across the table. You have 30 days. Their expressions shifted in unison: shock, confusion, disbelief. And just as the silence started to boil into shouting, Mom standing up, Mason shaking his head, Dad finally speaking, I grabbed my bag, stood up, and left them sitting there, stunned. The door clicked shut behind me, but their voices didn't follow. No one ran after me. No one begged or apologized. The silence felt louder than any confrontation, and as I walked down the steps of the porch I used to sit on as a kid, I realized just how long I'd waited for them to act like a family, and how long they'd made it clear they never would. I got into the rental car and just sat there for a moment, watching the house. The porch light flickered slightly, like it always did. The paint on the siding was still chipped. Mason had said for years he'd repaint it when he got around to it. He never did, because he didn't have to. I paid for upkeep. I paid for everything. They just lived. And now, for the first time, they were going to have to figure out what living actually meant. Back at the hotel, I didn't sleep much. I thought I'd feel better. Lighter. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from childhood to now. Every time I was pushed aside for Mason's drama, every report card ignored, every success downplayed, every check mailed without thanks, every call answered with, "Can you help us just this once?" The next morning, I turned off my phone. I knew they'd start calling. I didn't want to hear it. Not until I was ready. By Monday, I was back in Chicago, back at my desk, back to work. But I was different. I'd finally drawn a boundary, and they knew it. I didn't check my voicemail until Tuesday night. There were 11 messages. The first few were from my mom. Calm, almost chirpy. Hey, honey, so we saw what you left. There must be some kind of mix-up, right? I mean, we can just talk, okay? No need to make things legal. Then a more serious tone. Alex, call me. Your brother's upset. And then, her voice brittle, low, almost whispered. You're going to regret this. You don't treat family like this. The messages from Mason were worse. He didn't leave voicemails. He just sent text after text, some vague threats, some begging. One simply read, "You're nothing without us." But I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I met with my lawyer. We went over the paperwork, ensured it was ironclad. We sent the official notice via certified mail the same day. I gave them 30 days to vacate. It was more than generous. I could have gone for 14. But some part of me still hoped they'd use that time to reflect. To reach out not with anger or blame, but with remorse. They didn't. Week 2, Mom posted on Facebook a photo of the house, captioned, "Home is where the heart is." No matter what some people say. It got a few sympathy comments from distant relatives. She didn't tag me, but the implication was obvious. I didn't reply. Week 3, I got an email from an old family friend, Mr. Delgado. He and Grandpa had served on the same town council years ago. He said he was shocked to hear the news, but added, "I always wondered why your grandfather never let your mom sign anything official after he got sick. He trusted you, Alex. He said you were the only one who'd earned it." That message hit me harder than I expected, not because of the validation, but because it made everything feel real, permanent, like there was no going back. 25 days in, I flew back. Quietly. I didn't tell anyone. I just wanted to see for myself. The front yard was a mess. Lawn uncut. Trash bags on the porch. An old recliner dumped by the curb. There were boxes in the windows. They were packing. I stayed in the car, parked down the street, watching. I thought I'd feel triumphant. I didn't. Not exactly. There was a heaviness in my chest. Because no matter how toxic they were still my family. And I had to become the villain in their story to reclaim my own. Then I saw Mason step out, carrying a box. He looked tired. Not angry. Not smug. Just beaten down. And behind him, Mom, flustered, still in her slippers, holding a stack of framed photos to her chest like they might shatter. For the first time in years, I didn't see them as the untouchable forces of my childhood. I saw them as what they were, two adults who made a series of choices. And now they were facing the consequences. The next day, I got a text. From Dad. Just 5 words. "We're gone. Hope you're happy." That was it. No apology. No understanding. Just blame. And I sat on my couch, in my quiet apartment, reading those words over and over, thinking about how strange it felt that after years of begging for scraps of affection, what I got in the end was a guilt trip. But I wasn't sad. Not really. I was done chasing approval. Done paying for a seat at the table they never intended to offer freely. I had my own table now. And a week later, I got the final confirmation in the mail. The house was officially in my name, vacant, with no contest. But what I decided to do next, even I didn't see coming. I didn't go back to the house right away. Something about stepping inside while their presence was still fresh made my skin crawl. I needed time. Not just for them to be gone, but for their ghosts to be gone too. The passive-aggressive comments over breakfast. The stares that lasted just a second too long. The weight in the air every time I walked into a room like I didn't belong there. I wasn't ready to relive any of it. Not yet. So I waited another 2 weeks. Let the house breathe. Let it become a building again, not a battlefield. And during that time, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat down with Grandpa's letter. I hadn't read it again since that day in the lawyer's office, when my hands were still shaking and I was trying to pretend it didn't change everything. But now, in the silence of my apartment, I unfolded the paper and took it in. Every word, every cross-out and scribble. He'd written it in the nursing home. You could tell from the dated letterhead. The pen was fading, the pressure uneven, but the tone, it was him. That sharp wit wrapped in kindness. He talked about how lonely it got after Grandma passed. How much he looked forward to my visits. How I never rushed him. How I asked questions about his war stories even when I'd heard them before. He said he saw himself in me, but a better version. Smarter, kinder, stronger. And then, the last line. Take this house and make it yours. Not for them. For you. Build something you can be proud of. I didn't cry. I just sat there for a long time, holding the paper like it might fall apart if I let go. And that's when I made the decision. The next weekend, I drove out early. The sun hadn't fully come up yet when I pulled into the driveway. It was surreal, seeing the house like that. Empty. Still. The porch creaked under my feet like it remembered me. Inside, it was eerie. Boxes gone. Rooms cleared out. But the smell was still there. That strange mix of dust, old curtains, and lemon cleaning wipes. I wandered through the hallways slowly, brushing my fingers along the walls. The kitchen, where I used to do homework while Mason hogged the TV. The dining room, where every holiday turned into a stage play with me as the background extra. I made my way to the living room, and that's when I saw it. They'd left something behind. A photo frame, tucked into the corner of the bookshelf, almost hidden. It was a picture of the whole family, me, Mason, Mom, Dad, and Grandpa, all in front of the house one summer. I was maybe 13. My head was turned slightly, like I wasn't ready, like I wasn't part of the moment. I stared at it for a while. Then I flipped it over. No message, just a crack in the wood where someone had clearly dropped it once. I set it down, face down on the table, and exhaled. That night, I didn't go back to Chicago. I brought a sleeping bag and stayed in my old bedroom, now completely stripped. I laid on the hardwood floor, staring up at the ceiling, and tried to imagine what Grandpa would want me to do. The next morning, I made some calls. By Tuesday, I'd hired a local renovation crew, not just for repainting and rewiring, but for a full overhaul. I wanted the house to breathe again, not as a museum to my childhood, but as something new, something I could walk through without flinching. And I had a plan, not to sell it, not to rent it out for a profit. I wanted to turn it into something useful, something better, a quiet place for people like me. People who had nowhere to go during the holidays, who were always the afterthought, who showed up with full hands and left with empty hearts. I started drafting the paperwork for a nonprofit housing initiative. Nothing big at first, just a pilot. One house, a proof of concept, a place for overlooked college students who'd aged out of foster care. I knew a few from my old campus days, and I remembered how invisible they felt. Always grateful, always quiet, always pretending they weren't carrying the world on their backs. I knew that feeling. The idea came together faster than I thought. A local social worker I knew from volunteering at food drives put me in touch with two students right away. One was studying biology while working nights at a gas station. The other was a nursing major trying to afford both rent and her mom's medication. Both of them had been couch surfing for weeks. I offered them each a room, rent-free. Just one rule: take care of the house and yourselves. By month's end, they'd moved in. And for the first time, the place felt warm. They cooked together, laughed in the kitchen, played music that filtered through the hallway. I visited every Sunday, not to check up, but to bring groceries and sit on the porch like Grandpa used to. I didn't feel like an outsider. I didn't feel like the wallet. I just felt human. But of course, peace never lasts forever. One night, about 3 weeks into the new arrangement, I got a call from the local hardware store. A man had come in asking questions about the house, saying he was the real owner. Said he was looking to buy parts for his porch. I asked for a description. Heavy set, buzz cut, wore a faded leather jacket with an old dealership patch on the shoulder. Mason. Apparently, he hadn't gone far. And he wasn't done. I didn't panic. Not immediately. I just stood there in my kitchen, phone still in hand, heart thudding louder with each passing second. The store clerk had done me a favor by calling. He said Mason didn't buy anything, just looked around, asked about me, the house, even dropped hints like he was thinking of moving back in. But that was the part that set off the alarm bells. Mason didn't let things go. Ever. He wasn't the type to admit defeat or disappear quietly. And now that he had no free ride, no couch to crash on, no mom or dad to shield him, he was angry. And when Mason got angry, he got reckless. So, I called my lawyer. We walked through the scenario together. Mason had no legal claim to the property. Everything was airtight. I'd even filed the final deed transfer with the county clerk, and the nonprofit initiative was officially registered. Legally, he was just a guy with a bruised ego and no leverage. But legally and emotionally are two different things. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept imagining worst-case scenarios. Him showing up at the house, yelling at the students, trying to break in. He was petty enough to do it and proud enough to think he could bluff his way back inside. So I got ahead of it. The next day, I installed a full security system: cameras, smart locks, motion sensors. I gave the tenants direct numbers for my lawyer, the local police station, and even the renovation crew who lived nearby. I wasn't going to let them deal with my family's mess. Because that's what this had become, my mess. Not theirs. But just as I started to relax, it happened. 2 nights later, I got the call. A neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Winslow, who used to bake us cookies when we were kids, phoned me in a panic. "Alex, someone's on the porch. It's your brother. I think it's Mason. He's pounding on the door, yelling something about how it's his house." My stomach dropped. I told her to hang up and call the police. Then I called the tenants. They were scared, but safe. They'd locked the doors and turned on the security alarm. Mason hadn't gotten inside. 15 minutes later, the cops arrived and found Mason still in the yard, pacing. He didn't resist. Just sat down on the front steps like he belonged there. Like he still thought he had some kind of right to be angry. They issued him a trespassing warning and told him not to come back. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next week, my mom sent me a voicemail. Her voice was strained, tired, brittle in a way that was almost unfamiliar. "Alex, I don't know what happened to you. I really don't. You've changed. You used to care about family. You used to help us without question. Now it's like you're trying to erase us. Your brother is struggling. Your father is humiliated. And I can't even sleep in my own bed without thinking of everything we've lost. I hope you're proud of yourself. I deleted it without replying. Because the truth is, I had changed. I wasn't their puppet anymore. I wasn't the silent son who handed over paychecks and swallowed every backhanded comment just to keep the peace. I wasn't the convenient scapegoat for their failures. I was finally living for me. Still, I needed closure. Not for them, for me. So I did something bold. I wrote them a letter. No accusations. No screaming. Just the truth. I wrote, Mom, Dad, Mason, I've spent most of my life trying to earn a place in this family. I thought if I worked hard enough, supported you enough, proved myself enough, you'd treat me with respect. Instead, you treated my success like a bank account and my kindness like weakness. You laughed at me. You dismissed me. You called me family only when it was convenient. I never asked for anything. I never wanted control. I just wanted to be seen. But now I've taken back what was always mine. The house isn't a punishment. It's a symbol, not of revenge, but of release. I've turned it into something good. Something you could never understand because you were too busy using people to see the value in helping them. I don't hate you. I don't even resent you anymore. But I don't owe you anything. If you want to rebuild something with me, it has to be from the ground up, with honesty, humility, and respect. Until then, this is goodbye. Alex. I mailed it to their new address, an apartment Mason had managed to find through a distant cousin. They were still together, still complaining, still spinning the story like I'd stolen something from them. But I didn't wait for a response, because I didn't need one. Life moved on. The nonprofit grew. Donations started coming in from old classmates, local businesses, even a few anonymous checks I suspected came from people like me, people who'd walked away from families that drained them. I hired more staff, renovated another property. By the end of the year, we had 4 students living in safety, building their futures, and reclaiming their dignity, just like I had. One afternoon, I returned to the original house to drop off a box of books. As I walked up the porch steps, I caught a glimpse of something I hadn't seen in years. One of the tenants, Sam, the nursing major, was sitting on the porch swing, her feet tucked under her, reading in the sun. It reminded me of Grandpa, of the days when he'd sit out there with a cup of tea and wave at every single person who passed. I smiled. Hey, Sam said, looking up. You're early. Couldn't stay away, I said. And it was true. I wasn't haunted by the past anymore. I wasn't stuck in the roles they forced on me. I had peace. I had purpose. And for the first time in my life, I finally understood what family really meant. It's not blood. It's not obligation. It's the people who show up when you have nothing left to give, and give anyway. The house was no longer theirs. It wasn't even mine. It belonged to something bigger. And so did I.